So, good evening to everybody. Tonight is a question and answer session. So I'll endeavour to answer the questions the best I can.
Dear Tan Ajahn, when I contemplate the Dhamma, example on death and the four elements, sometimes I am able to see the truth. And when that happens, I feel heavy-hearted and start to tear. It feels like I've been deluded for many lifetimes, and yet I am still stuck. Why is that I have such an experience? What should I do when such experiences arise?
Well, I think these kind of experiences in meditation are quite common for many of us. And you might say it's a sign of progress, even though the actual experience may bring up tears, sense of sadness. We might say that it's the waking up to the truth of life, of existence, that it's bound up with stress and suffering. Having been born, we have to experience aging, sickness and death. That's just nature, and there's no way out of that. And a lot of the time we're distracting ourselves from those truths. But when we meditate, we're bringing our mind back to bring up mindfulness, awareness, and contemplate the truth. So we often will have an insight into the nature of our existence. And for many people that brings tears. Sometimes it can be a very overwhelming experience. And it's like insight into the first noble truth. There is suffering. And the Buddha encouraged us to study this, learn from that, rather than suppress it, distract ourselves from it, hide it away. It's something to learn from, come to understand. But what it leads on to is the search for a way out of suffering. So rather than just dwelling on the sadness of that realization, one then looks for the path, the way out of suffering, which gives rise to the search for the Arya path, the Noble Eightfold Path, which we describe as the way out of suffering. So even though the starting point may be one that's slightly sad, it's leading on to good things, because it is our motivation to pursue the search for the truth, the Dhamma, and to understand what is the cause of suffering in our heart, and to abandon that through the practice. And you might find in the course of your practice you have those kind of realizations arising quite often. But rather than getting, like you say, stuck in them or dwelling on them, you have to use that experience as a motivation to go on to practice, to further your practice, with curiosity and interest, to understand, why am I suffering? Why do I feel like this? What can I do about it? Many people feel, when they have these realizations, that it's like life is a bit like a prison. We're stuck in the prison of our mind, our moods and emotions and thoughts, the prison of the experience of the body, aging, sometimes getting sick, having aches and pains and so on. So then that leads on to the desire for freedom. We have to look for that through our practice, and with our faith in the Buddha and his teachings, that's our good fortune, that we have a clear pathway of practice to cultivate and develop. and that's where we should put our efforts.
Next question. Dear Tan Ajahn, what is the method of manomiyati? Is this hard to accomplish? And is it the right path of practice?
I imagine this question comes from a Thai. Manomayiti is a very well-known method of meditation associated with a very well-known and well-loved meditation master, Non-Porous, who passed away many years ago, but when he was alive was very, very famous and respected as a meditation teacher. And although generally he taught Buddhism as any other Buddhist teacher would, he over the years came to specialize in one particular form of meditation, encouraging people to develop it, called Manomayiti. Mano means mind, yiti comes from itirit, or the word in Pali referring to the psychic ability or special knowledges we can develop when we train the mind in meditation, in samadhi. And this way of meditation is particularly aimed at developing special knowledge of the other realms of existence that we don't normally see. Realms that the Buddha talked about, hell realms, heaven realms, ghost realms. You know, normally we can only see this human realm and the animal realm. But the Buddha pointed out these other realms that do exist. And this way, Manomayiti is a way of developing samadhi, particularly to see or have a direct experience of these other realms, with the aim to make the practitioner very aware of karma, in particular, karma and the fruits of karma. You probably are familiar with the Buddha's own life story. On the night of his enlightenment, he gained 3 knowledges. The knowledge of the arising and passing away of beings was one of them. You know, when people die, seeing where their stream of consciousness arises in their next life, according to their karma, was one of those knowledges. And it's sort of similar to that. It's a method of meditation, getting people to see these different realms of existence so they really believe in karma and will then act accordingly to develop wholesome, skillful karma and abandon unwholesome karma. But sometimes it's considered to be a bit of a diversion from the main Eightfold Buddhist path leading to the end of suffering, or what we call sila, samadhi, panya. And the experience people have, you know, a few people seem to be quite good at that kind of meditation and have genuine insight and awareness and special knowledge arises. But some people seem to stray from the Buddhist path and just get fascinated in the experience of nimittas, aiming to see beings in other realms and visual images of heaven and hell realms and so on, and sometimes can get quite deluded by it, or at least distracted from the real path, which is the removal of kilesa, or the causes of suffering, from our mind. So when Non-Porous passed away himself, this method sort of faded a little bit. It's still around in Thailand, but it's not so popular anymore. And it's generally not, you won't find it taught in most meditation monasteries or places where you learn about meditation. But it's something just to be aware of. It is one method of meditation that does exist. But I would recommend to follow the way of Lumpur Cha, and developing sila, samadhi, panya, learning to develop mindfulness in daily life, and then contemplating, particularly to focus on the three characteristics of existence, the impermanent nature of phenomena, the unsatisfactory nature of phenomena, the selfless nature of phenomena, and develop some real insight that will liberate your mind from delusion.
What is Samadhi?
Well, Samadhi is a term we use and hear a lot of. Strictly speaking, it's the eighth factor of the Eightfold Noble Path that comes within the Four Noble Truths that form the heart of the Buddhist path, the Buddhist teachings. That is, the Buddha explained suffering, what it is, what its cause is, what has to be done with that cause, has to be abandoned. The cause of suffering is craving and attachment, has to be abandoned. Nirodha, the cessation of suffering, something to be realized. And then the Eightfold Path is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, which is to be cultivated, developed. And what we call Samma Samadhi, you might say, is Buddhist Samadhi. It's the development of the state of mind that is calm, concentrated, steady, wholesome, and particularly focused on an object. And it's the eighth factor of the path, but it is cultivated together with all the other seven factors. They all support Samadhi just as Samadhi supports the other factors. So it's essential, if you're developing the Buddhist path for the end of stress and suffering, to also cultivate sila, living in a moral or ethical way, having some moral principles and guidelines that guide our speech and actions, our livelihood. And then developing what we call the higher states of mind, the higher practice for training the mind. So that's right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi, right concentration. Often they use the word concentration for samadhi. That can lead to some misunderstanding. So sometimes people use calm, peace of mind, steadiness of mind, or firmness of mind. And samadhi is developed literally out of the development of mindfulness, sati, the seventh factor. So when we develop samma sati, right mindfulness, the ability of the mind to recollect an object, when that's developed continuously, then the mind starts to experience samadhi. And samadhi means the mind that is free from the hindrances or obstacles to samadhi, which there are 5 of. Sensual desire is probably the hardest of all to abandon. So the desire for seeing sights, hearing sounds, taste, smell, touch. These 5 strands of sensual desire are constantly affecting our mind, distracting our mind, preoccupying our mind. But the one who is developing samadhi is learning to abandon sensual desire. Then ill will and aversion, sleepiness, dullness of mind, restlessness, agitation of mind, and then skeptical doubt and uncertainty. These are 5 hindrances to samadhi. And the cultivation of right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi is to, in the first instance, we're overcoming these 5 hindrances, learning to let them go and settle the mind. So usually we develop a meditation object such as the breath. You learn to practice mindfulness of breathing, and as we become more skilled in that, bringing the mind to be focused, aware of the breath over and over again through the practice of mindfulness. We're gradually letting go of those 5 hindrances till the mind becomes very bright, steady, still, calm. and happy. There's a sense of happiness, inner contentment, happiness, enjoyment, which is not dependent on anything external. So you might say it's immaterial happiness. It's internal happiness of the mind that is calm. Sometimes teachers will say the mind that is happy is like a mind with a smile on it. In Thai they say jit yim, which is the word for smile. Because when the mind is in samadhi, whether it's just for a few minutes or for a longer, deeper session or a longer period of hours, it's happy within itself. So it's as if the mind has a smile on it. Because it's content to keep developing mindfulness on an object or even to contemplate. And that's the other aspect of samadhi. It's a basis for developing wisdom through contemplation. And when the mind is calm, still, happy within itself, then it's undistracted. It's in a good state to observe the truth, contemplate the truth about this body, this mind. So it supports that ability of the mind to turn its attention back on the body and mind, what we call 5 khandhas of experience. So that's body, feelings, memories, thoughts, sense consciousness, and observe them as they are, particularly to see, say, the rising and passing away of thoughts and feelings, and the changing nature of physical form and so on. When the mind is calm in samadhi, it's in a very good position to do that, to contemplate or develop insight. And that's the real benefit, the real purpose of samadhi is to calm the mind and direct the mind so it can contemplate well and see the truth. And this has a liberating effect on the mind. Samadhi alone is not enough to abandon the causes of suffering, craving and attachment, but it's a factor that will support the arising of clear seeing or wisdom or insight that will uproot the causes of suffering, that is craving and attachment. Samadhi alone is not something that's unique to Buddhism. Samadhi, it was there in the world before the Buddha, and the Buddha, before he became enlightened, when he was a bodhisattva, went to study with the foremost teachers of samadhi in India at the time, but found there was still something missing or lacking in what they taught, even though they trained him to a very high level of samadhi, and he was very proficient at it. And that is something that's very worthy, but without wisdom and the wisdom of insight, that samadhi is limited. It cannot free the human mind from the causes of suffering completely. So, in conclusion, you might say samadhi is always to be practiced with the other factors of the path: right view, right thought, right action, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness. That's the Buddhist practice of samadhi.
When we speak about the refined kilesas, how do we identify them so that we can let them go?
Well, in short, we have to train the mind in wisdom, investigation, contemplation of itself and the mental states and the phenomena and the experiences we have arising moment by moment, day by day. We have a mixture of coarse, medium and refined mental defilements. And so it's natural that generally you will notice the coarse ones first. The coarse mental defilements, meaning coarse mental states of greed and desire, anger and aversion and hatred, delusion and confusion. When they manifest in their most coarsest form, we tend to notice them first. So when you have strong greed, you notice it because it often will manifest, come out in your behavior, your speech, your actions. You want something, you desire something, you tend to notice that, particularly for material things. So seeing something you like, your eyes will tend to dwell on that, and you'll notice that. Hearing something you like, you dwell on that, and then you might notice that. For someone practicing mindfulness and developing the path, you'll notice the coarse defilements first. You'll notice coarse anger first, because it will express itself in your speech, your actions, the way you look, the way you feel. Whereas more subtle kinds of anger, distaste, discontent may be hidden for a long time in our practice. So that's the one of the challenges of the practice of training this mind, is there always seems to be something hidden away there that you didn't realize before. So in one sense it's kind of interesting as you reveal your different kilesas, cravings and attachments. It's quite interesting, even enjoyable, the more you do it. But at the same time, it's a little bit daunting, especially in the beginning, because it's like you seem to be never ending your practice. There's always one more kilesa that you didn't notice or didn't pick up on before, and suddenly it emerges. And we've always all had that experience of strong or subtle greed or anger or delusion seemingly popping up out of nowhere when we thought we weren't being bothered by something, and then suddenly we get some form of suffering arising. So some of the most subtle kilesas, can be conceit, just this subtle sense of a self, an I, comparing myself with others, better than, same as, worse than. Subtle attachment to pleasant feeling associated with samadhi, say, the desire for piti or sukha, rapture, joy, happiness, states of that. You experience one state of bliss or samadhi and you feel quite happy, and you seem to have let go of many things having experienced that state, and then gradually it fades. Maybe when you experience a state of samadhi, even for only a short period of time, your mind, because of its desire for nibbana, for attainment, for the end of suffering, the mind can latch onto that and in a deluded way think, oh, this is nibbana already, I've done it, I've let go of everything, there's nothing bothering my mind is steady, unwavering, nothing can bother it. And then something comes along that stimulates some greed or lust or anger, and you realize, oh, it wasn't that after all. Some of those experiences are quite painful. One can experience some quite deep samadhi and then come out of that, and then like with a thud, one crashes to the ground, and you realize you've been caught out by yet another kilesa that you didn't recognize before. So this is why Luang Por Chah always taught us to use this reflection and mai nair, it's not sure. Maybe you have attained nibbana, but maybe not. Maybe you've attained samadhi, maybe not. Maybe you've let go of a certain kilesa, but maybe not. You have to keep that 1% of uncertainty open so that you have that flexibility and preparedness to contemplate what's arising in your experience, and to be ready for the fact that maybe it's not what you think. So every practitioner will have had this experience, being very blissful, the mind is calm, steady, and then something comes along and kind of jolts you, or pushes your button, or jolts you, and you realize, that wasn't what I thought it was. A subtle kilesa has been triggered. So, even the Buddha in his previous lives as a hermit, attaining deep states of jhana, coming out and then experiencing lust or falling in love with some beautiful woman. It's possible. Beauty can catch us, worldly beauty can catch us where we thought we've let it go, but then it's still there. Or the words of other people. So like somebody can feel they're attained. Once upon a time there was a practitioner came to Ajahn Chah and they were sure they've attained Sotapanna, stream winner. Perhaps as a way of teaching that person just to check how attached they were to the idea of being attained. Ajahn Chah said, it's a little better than a dog. At which that practitioner got angry and got up and left in a huff and was probably shown to be not what they thought they were. And that's part of the value of a teacher. A skilled teacher is sometimes they can help point out some of these subtle defilements that we haven't seen ourselves. They can point the way, but ultimately we have to do the investigation. And so if we use this reflection, it's not sure, maybe, maybe not, we'll see, then you're on safe ground and you can carry on practicing, but you're always ready, looking and alert in case there are kilesas you haven't realized.
What is the best way to practice dana?
Well, basically the Buddha encouraged us to practice dana, which means giving, sharing, in a way that makes us feel happy. And particularly in the beginning of our practice, that may just be whatever kind of generosity or sharing that is available to us that we feel comfortable and happy to do. So it may be helping a particular person in our circle of acquaintances or families, sharing things with them, giving them support. Maybe someone in our neighborhood or where we live. It could be a charity, it could be helping the sick by volunteering or giving some kind of support. At this time, there's a lot of people who are out of work or have lost income, so there's a lot of different volunteering and charity going on in the form of just sharing food, cooking for others, giving away free meals to people who suddenly have lost their income. So sharing dana that makes us feel happy in the doing of it and is something that's useful for society is a good starting point. But also dana that supports the religion, particularly Sangha, monks and nuns, giving material support to them, is a special kind of dana because it draws your mind closer to the teachings and gives rise to many other good qualities that support your practice. Because if you support Sangha, it brings you close to the Sangha, so you hear teachings, you get the example of people who are practicing renunciation, and that can be a great support to your own practice of renunciation, keeping the precepts, learning to meditate, because it's reinforcing your own aspiration for spiritual liberation when you associate with those who are practicing it. And Sangha, they've given up income and the material happiness of life. They're living without any kind of income or money, living in a way that they are dependent on the support of laity. So when we support Sangha, we get a particular kind of happiness, and we get many good qualities arise in our mind. Obviously, we're letting go of our own attachments to material things, some of our possessiveness, stinginess, but we're also aspiring to the higher Dhamma of Nibbana when we support Sangha. So it's sooner or later, if you are aspiring to follow the Buddhist path, it will become a part of your practice, is to support Sangha in one way or another. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be one spoonful of rice if that's all you've got, or it can be the smallest act of kindness or support. As indeed any kind of charity or dana we practice, it how much or how little is only part of the story. More important is, our intention. Whether there's a genuine intention to give, to let go of one's own attachment, to support something that is good out of compassion and also out of wisdom. And you'll find when you practice dana with a pure heart, with a genuine intention, it gives you a good feeling at the time of doing it, and it gives you a good memory. So like for myself, I can remember when I was a layperson supporting monks and nuns in different monasteries. I was a student, so I didn't have a lot of money, but I was willing to help and to share what I had. And I can still remember those occasions today, almost 40 years ago, with happiness. So I understand when other people feel happy to practice generosity in whatever way, why are they happy? I can understand that because I've done it myself. So it's a very good thing, a very necessary thing in the world to practice dana, and it just means learning to share or give what you have. What you have available, your own knowledge, your kindness of heart, your time, your energy, your material things, whatever it is. Sometimes in Buddhism people get this idea, dana is only worth giving if you have a lot. If you're wealthy, then you can really do something good and give a lot of money or a big donation or something. And of course, if you're in a position to give a lot of charity, and there are those people in the world, well, that can be an amazing thing, can do a lot of good. But it's not essential to have a lot to be able to practice dana. You might have just a little and you can still practice, because more important is your intention. The genuine intention to let go of something you have and to share with others out of compassion, out of seeing the benefit of that. So I often remember the story from the monastery in Bangkok, where it's a city monastery and people frequent city monasteries every day. Large numbers of people visit as tourists or visit the monks, participate in events, ceremonies, teaching programs, and so on. They're busy places. So often they have beggars set up there, people who have no income, no possessions, and rely on begging for their livelihood. And there was this occasion, this one beggar was in one of these city temples, and he had his own corner in the courtyard of the monastery, and every day he would sit there, barefoot, just wearing rags, sit on the ground with his little pot to collect money. Very patient in the heat, in the dust, he would sit there day after day. That was his job, that was what he did. And he just lived in a tiny little shack not far from the temple with no possessions. And he did this every day. And most people just hardly noticed him. He was just part of the furniture, but of course some people would put some coins in his little pot. And in that monastery, as is normal from time to time monasteries, that monastery was an old monastery, so they had to pull down the main meditation hall because it was just too old. It had needed to be rebuilt. So they pulled it down and were rebuilding it, and they had a program, a project to raise funds to rebuild this meditation hall. So there were lots of events and people would come every day, offer food, offer donations towards the building of the hall. And that beggar was there all through this period. It went on for a couple of years, I believe. And towards the end of the time where they were raising funds to build the new hall and the construction was going ahead, one day there was what we call a Sangha Dana offering. People came to offer food, other requisites and donations to support the monastery and to build the hall, and the monks were lined up and people were making their offerings, and after everyone made their offerings, the beggar came into the hall with a big plastic bag and deposited it in front of the abbot of the monastery. Very heavy, he struggled to lift it onto the platform where the monk was sitting. And the abbot knew the beggar, obviously, because he saw him every day, and he said, "Oh, what are you doing here today?" And he said, "Oh, I want to make my donation." And the abbot was a bit surprised because he's a beggar, but was very gracious and kind. So said, okay, you can make your donation and we'll give you a blessing. So the bags were placed there and the monks gave the beggar a blessing, and then the bags were taken somewhere and emptied out, and they were full of coins, some notes but mostly coins. And somebody had to spend a long time counting because they were big bags and very heavy. And they counted around 1 million baht, which is a lot for anyone, let alone a beggar. So when they found out the amount, they went back to the beggar and they said, where did you get all this money from? And he said, well, you've seen me the last 20, 30, whatever years. I've been sitting here and people are kind, they share their money with me, a few coins every day. And I don't need much. I only need my food for the day and a roof over my head, so I've been able to save. And every day I've been sitting here begging. I've watched other people come into the monastery and make offerings, and they always go away happy. Their faces are happy having made their offering. They go home content, happy that they've done something good. And I've always had the thought in my mind, I want that happiness. I want to experience that as well. All my life I've been begging. I want to be able to give and share like those people. So this is my day, this is my chance. So even a beggar can give, if the heart is there and there's the wisdom to see the value of it, anyone can practice dana in whatever way they can.
Dear Tan Ajahn, could you kindly elaborate on the relationship between social media and ego? How does social media do harm to somebody who actively produces content? And does this hinder our practice?
Well, it can do, but it doesn't have to. Yes, technology, social media that is based on modern technology, internet, online, it's a double-edged sword. So it can be used for great benefit to spread the Dhamma, to support people in different ways, say, particularly at this time where people aren't able to leave their homes and participate in live events physically. They can participate in virtual or online events such as this, listening to Dhamma, chanting together, and it can be a support for one's practice. For the one giving, the one teaching, then whether you're teaching online or in person, the dangers or the obstacles are there to the ego. One can start to worry about people, what they think of one, do they like what one says, agree with what one says or not, how popular one might be, how unpopular one might be. Whether you're teaching in person or online, those same things apply. Perhaps online it's just more clear because people tick and they like and they dislike and they comment. When you speak live, often you don't get that clear feedback. You might give a talk and then people leave. If it's online and it's stuck online for a while, then people start to leave their feedback. But the practice for the practitioner is the same, whether one is the one giving content, producing content, or the one is observing, receiving that content. You practice the Eightfold Path just the same as without social media, without technology. You're developing sila, samadhi, panya. You're reflecting on your experience. So the one teaching is teaching themselves as well as teaching others. The one listening is listening and teaching themselves. So I'd encourage people to use social media, apps, online streaming and so on for the benefit of the Dhamma, to further their practice. And each of us have to consider where we are in our practice and the results of what we're doing. So if it's becoming an obsession or something that causes you a lot of extra additional stress and suffering in your life, well, maybe reduce it. And certainly social media can become a big distraction. But if you find it helpful, then good. So like on the helpful side, one thing that is I notice is that when I was a layperson or even a junior monk, it was quite hard to get a lot of Dhamma. There was a small amount of Dhamma books. Tape recordings were even harder to get. So it was quite hard to get Dhamma, even of well-known teachers. Whereas now, you've got the option to listen to Ajahn Chah in Thai or English. You can listen to endless, very good meditation masters, who we consider to be enlightened arahants. They're there, it's available. You can go to work, and instead of listening to music, you can listen to an enlightened teacher's talk, if you so wish. So in that sense, it's a great blessing for the world to have this technology easily available. But to the detriment of the world, we can also get lost in the content, the technology, and all the kilesas that can come out in the use of the technology. That can be distracting. As we know, there's many associated problems with social media, passing on poor content or unwholesome, unskillful content, and so on. So each person has to consider this for themselves. The one teaching, the one listening, the people using. That's part of our practice. But I think generally, especially at this time when people are housebound, then technology can be a really useful thing to help us. But we have to keep practicing and observing and learning from the experience.
Dear Lumpong, I have a friend who asked me if karma has anything to do with all the people dying from COVID-19. Could you kindly speak a little bit about karma? Thank you.
Simply speaking, yes, of course, karma is involved, the karma of birth. Because once you're born, then you become subject to aging, sickness, and death. And there's no way around that. It comes as a package, it comes as a complete thing. How you die, when you die, you don't know yet. And most likely it'll be one form of illness will be the cause of your death, aging and illness. Sometimes it's accident and other ways, but most common in the world is illness and aging. So anyone born in the world has got to face up to these things, and these are truths that we can contemplate and come to understand. Even though we can't escape from them, we can understand them and transcend them by understanding that's the nature of physical phenomena, is to be subject to impermanence, arising and ceasing. It's unsatisfactory, and you see a human body it's fragile, it's open to illness, as we see at the moment. Some illnesses are very contagious, easily pass from one person to another. But there's so many illnesses in the world. We're focusing on COVID-19 at the moment, but there's so many other illnesses already there. It's not like this is anything new. We're all subject to aging, sickness, and death. And this is our karma. So the only ones who don't have to worry about this kind of karma anymore are the arahants, the enlightened ones, who've reached nibbana, the deathless, and they won't have to be born again. And this is the purpose of the Buddhist practice. This is why the Buddha started meditating. He said, I want to find a way that goes beyond birth, aging, sickness, and death. So yes, of course, illness is part of our karmic experience. But the Buddha encouraged us not to speculate too much on old past karma, what led to what. If you have no direct knowledge, then you can waste a lot of energy and get quite confused or caught up in such speculation, and it's maybe not that useful. More important is, how are you going to live in the present moment? If you're healthy, how are you going to live? How are you going to improve your life and do that which is good for yourself and others? If you're sick, how can you practice with that situation? And the important thing, the message from the Buddha is, even if you're sick and seriously ill, even terminally ill, you can still practice to the very last breath of your life. And that's one of the amazing things about the Buddhist teachings, is they're always there to help you to practice, to find more inner calm, inner understanding that can free your mind from mental stress, even though you can't always escape the physical stress and suffering of illness. Mentally, you can still find peace through the practice. I remember a couple of years ago I visited a man who, he didn't have COVID-19 coronavirus, but he had terminal cancer. And it's a very good example of how the practice can help us when we have illness. And he'd been diagnosed maybe when he was 50 with terminal cancer, and that made him very angry. A very common reaction, why me? Why has this happened to me? I don't want this. And he got very angry with the doctors who couldn't cure him. They tried to cure him, but they couldn't. In the end, they said he has to leave the hospital. There's nothing more they can do for him. So he was always angry with the doctors and nurses when he was in the hospital, and when he left hospital, he was still angry with them. He was angry with his company because they did keep his position open for 6 months or something while he was getting treatment, but eventually they said, we're going to have to let you go. So he was angry with them. He came home from hospital, he was angry with his family because they couldn't really help him other than care for him, but they couldn't cure his illness. So he was angry with everyone. But he also had a lot of time to contemplate. He was lying in bed, he's very weak. And so during this time, he started to realize he's making himself unnecessarily miserable by just getting angry with everyone, including himself. It's not helping his condition, it's not improving anything. So he had a kind of a revolution in his thinking and realized getting angry and resisting, fighting the illness was not helping him or anyone else. So he started to accept it and practice kindness and compassion for himself and the people around him. And I went to visit, and his family all confirmed this. They said, oh, he's completely changed from being so miserable, angry, unpleasant, nobody wanted to be with him, to somebody who everybody did want to be with. He still was terminally ill, but he found peace in his heart, and he was practicing kindness every day, appreciating his family members who were helping him, appreciating the friends who would visit, appreciating what help he had received from his doctors and nurses, the company he used to work for. And he was becoming very popular because he was at peace with himself, and he died very peacefully, happily, with a lot of loving kindness in his mind. So I thought it was a very good example of how to deal with a difficult situation. So maybe that's the most important karma to focus on, is the good karma we can make in every situation. And just reflecting on what karma led up to this is maybe not that useful with illness. In some things it's useful to reflect. If you make a mistake, well, you can learn from your mistake. But with illness, you might not really know where it's come from. You just know it's something that's happened, and then you learn to make the best of the situation.
And the last question. Dear Lumpong, could you please explain the benefit of keeping the 8 precepts? Thank you.
Well, today is the Opposita Day, and it's traditional in Buddhist societies, communities, quite often on the Opposita Day, people come into a monastery or even at home, they determine to keep the 8 precepts. They're called the Opposita Sila. And particularly it's to improve or heighten one's efforts in the training of the mind and the letting go of kilesas. And the 8 precepts obviously include the 5 precepts, which we try and cultivate and train with every day anyway. But the 8 precepts is just improving that effort and cutting out certain aspects of our daily life, streamlining our daily life so that we can really focus particularly on meditation, training the mind, cutting out distractions, and activities that can be a basis for increasing kilesa rather than reducing kilesa. So not eating afternoon keeps your day very simple, just eating enough in the morning, and then in the evening you've got all that energy free for practice, and you don't have a full stomach, you don't have to spend a lot of time finding food, cooking, cleaning up afterwards and so on. And it cuts out a lot of socializing which happens around food. And then not engaging in music, dancing, wearing makeup, jewelry, watching entertainment, sports and so on. One cuts that out again to release, free up a lot of mental energy for the practice of meditation in particular, for living simply, practicing mindfulness in daily life. It helps. And then living on a simple bed, often just on the floor, a simple mattress on the floor, or if one's on a bed, just a simple mattress. One is dedicating one's time more to meditation and the practice rather than sleep, which can become an indulgence. So the 8 precepts are particularly helping one to develop one's meditation practice. So when lay people come to stay in monasteries, they keep the 8 precepts, or nowadays we have a lot more meditation retreats in monasteries or centres, and the 8 precepts support the practice of meditation. Some people are very dedicated, so even when they're at home, they take on the 8 precepts, maybe once a week, on a weekend, or in a holiday time, or a few people, even when they still have to work, keep the 8 precepts once a week, or a few people every day. It's not easy, it's a challenge, but that effort one makes is what we call making nekama barami, in learning to renounce some of the pleasures and desirable things of this world that can easily distract us or just increase our greed and our attachment. It's giving them up. So it can be quite tough at first, but when you practice regularly, they get easier, and you hopefully start to appreciate the value of them as a support for your practice. And then also the practices of the Arya Sangha, the noble Sangha, the enlightened beings, monks, nuns, men, women who have become enlightened over the years. They will all keep the 8 precepts, because these are the customs of enlightened people. They don't need a lot. They don't need a lot of extra comforts, pleasures, distractions. They tend to simplify their life because their attention is turned inwards to training the mind, focusing on developing sila, samadhi, panya for liberation. So I think that was the last question, so we'll end the session here. We'll just pay respects to the Triple Gem, and we'll wish you all well. May you stay safe and healthy, and may you progress in the Dhamma and find peace of mind. And we'll see you next time.